The stars burned orange through the observation deck of the council station as Admiral Vexthar watched another world die. His scaled hands gripped the railing hard enough to leave marks in the metal. On the holographic display before him, the Sarah Prime flickered and went dark. 4 billion souls, gone in less than an hour. "Admiral, the Defense Fleet reports total loss," a young officer said behind him. Her voice shook. "All 7 species ships and destroyed. The Calreth are moving to the next system." Vexthar closed his eyes. 40 years he had fought these monsters. 40 years of watching worlds fall, civilizations crumble, entire species vanish from existence. The Calreth swarm consumed everything in their path like a plague of locusts made of chitin and hate. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They simply ate and moved on. "How many ships did we lose?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would hurt. 237 capital ships, Admiral. Maybe 1,000 smaller vessels. We're still counting the escape pods. 200 ships, gone. The Galactic Council had started this war with 6,000 warships from dozens of species. Now they had less than 800 left. The mathematics were simple and brutal. At this rate, they would be extinct within 2 years. The door to the observation deck opened. Ambassador Silene entered, her pale blue skin seeming to glow in the dim light. She was from the Valorian species, empaths who could feel the emotions of others. Vexthar wondered how she survived feeling the terror of billions as they died. "The council is gathering," she said softly. "They want your report." "My report is that we are losing," Vexthar said. He turned to face her. "We have lost 40% of all colonized space in 2 years. The Calreth have consumed 300 worlds. At our current rate of losses, we cannot hold the Nexus defense line for more than 6 months. After that, nothing stands between them and the core worlds." Selene's face was calm, but he could see the pain in her eyes. She felt everything. The fear, the desperation, the slowly dying hope of an entire galaxy. "Then we need something new," she said. "Some weapon, some strategy we haven't tried." "There is nothing new," Vexthar snapped. He immediately regretted his tone, but the frustration poured out anyway. "We have thrown everything at them. Fusion bombs, antimatter torpedoes, biological weapons, nanoplagues. Nothing stops them. They adapt, they evolve, they overcome. The Calreth are not just an army. They are a force of nature." They walked together through the gleaming corridors of the station toward the council chambers. Other species passed them, dozens of different forms. Reptilian Dravines like Vexthar, crystalline archons whose bodies rang like bells when they moved. The floating gas beings called wisps, massive armored chromath who had to duck through doorways. All of them had fought the Calreth. All of them were losing. The council chambers were chaos when they arrived. Representatives from 40 different species shouted at each other in a dozen languages. The translation devices struggled to keep up. "We must evacuate the outer colonies now." "Evacuation is surrender." "We must fight." "Fight with what?" "We have no ships left. The Chromath 4th Fleet can hold the line. The Chromath 4th Fleet is ash, just like every other fleet we send." Vexthar walked to the center podium. The room slowly quieted as he stood there waiting. He was old by Dravine standards, his scales graying at the edges, scars covering half his face from a Calreth acid strike 20 years ago. But he had earned respect through blood and loss. "The Sarah Prime has fallen," he said. His voice echoed in the sudden silence. "The Calreth will reach the Nexus defense line within 3 weeks. We estimate they will break through within 2 months. I recommend we begin evacuation of all worlds within 50 light-years of the line. We need to consolidate our forces for the defense of the core worlds." "Evacuation?" The Archon representative's crystalline voice rang with anger. "You would abandon billions?" "They will die either way," Vexthar said flatly. "At least this way some survive." An older representative stood. He was Talanex, one of the avian species whose people had nearly gone extinct in the first Calreth invasion. "There must be something we can do. Some ally we haven't called, some weapon we haven't used." "There is no one left," another said. "We are the Galactic Council. We represent every spacefaring species in known space. Who else is there?" Ambassador Silene had been quiet until now. She stood slowly, her movements graceful. "There is one species we haven't asked for help," she said. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what she meant. "The humans," she continued. "They made first contact with us 150 years ago. They shared some of their technology. They seemed peaceful, curious, and then they simply left. They built a barrier around their home systems and shut themselves away from the galaxy. The humans are dead, someone muttered, or hiding like cowards. We don't know that, Silene insisted. The quarantine barrier around their space is still active. It still requires massive amounts of power to maintain. Someone is keeping it running. Vexithar shook his head. I remember the humans. Yes, they were clever. Their technology was interesting. But they were soft. They wrote poetry and made art. They argued endlessly about philosophy and rights. They were not warriors. They were also adaptable, Silene said. That was what I remember most about them. They could change. They could become what they needed to be. The Chromath ambassador rumbled forward, his massive armored body shaking the floor. Even if the humans still exist, what could they offer? They had no major military when they left, a few hundred ships at most. We need thousands. We need anything, Silene said quietly. We are dying. What harm is there in asking? The debate raged for another hour. Some species argued the humans were extinct. Their worlds probably already consumed by some other threat. Others said the quarantine barrier proved they were hiding, and cowards would not help. A few, like Silene, held on to a thin hope that humanity might have something to offer. Finally, they voted. It was close. 23 species voted yes. 17 voted no. They would send a distress call into human space using the old frequencies from 150 years ago. This is pointless, Vexthar said after the vote. He and Silene stood alone in the observation deck again, watching the communications array power up. Even if anyone receives the message, even if humans still exist, what can they do? We need armies and weapons, not poetry and philosophy. Maybe, Silene said. She touched the glass, looking out at the stars. Or maybe we need someone who hasn't given up yet. We're so tired, Vexithar. We've been fighting for so long. Maybe we need fresh eyes, fresh hope. The distress call went out that night. It contained everything. The history of the war, the casualties, the desperate situation. It ended with a simple message. If anyone in human space receives this, we need help. The galaxy is dying. Please respond. 3 days passed with no answer. Vexthar buried himself in logistics, planning the evacuation of dozens of worlds. The news was universally bad. The Calreth had broken through another defensive position. 2 more worlds had gone silent. Refugee ships clogged the space lanes heading toward the core worlds. On the 4th day, something changed. Vexthar was in his office when the alarms went off. He rushed to the command center to find officers staring at their displays in confusion. What is it? He demanded. Sir, the quarantine barrier just powered down, a sensor officer said. Section 47, adjacent to the Calreth front lines. Powered down? You mean it failed? No, sir, it was deliberate. And something is coming through. We're detecting a massive energy signature moving at... That can't be right. What speed? 0.7 light speed, sir. And it's accelerating. No known species has ships that fast. Vexthar felt his heart's beating faster. Course? Heading directly toward the largest Calreth fleet concentration. The one attacking the Nexus defense line. Get me a visual. Use every sensor we have. The main display flickered to life. Long-range sensors tried to focus on whatever was coming out of human space. The image was grainy, distorted by the massive energy output, but slowly it resolved. It was a ship. But the size readings had to be wrong. Check those sensors, Vexthar ordered. That signature says the ship is 50 kilometers long. That's impossible. The officer rechecked. He looked up, his face pale. Sensors are working perfectly, Admiral. It's 54 kilometers long. And, sir, our database is identifying it as human design. The architecture matches their old ships from 150 years ago, but scaled up massively. The command center went silent. Everyone stared at the display as the ship streaked across space toward the war zone. After 150 years of silence, humanity had answered. And they had brought something that should not exist. Ambassador Silene arrived, summoned by emergency alert. She looked at the display and smiled. It was a sad smile, but also hopeful. I told you they would come, she whispered. One ship, Vexthar said. One ship against millions of Calreth bioships. What can one ship do? But even as he said it, he felt something he had not felt in years. Not quite hope, not yet. But maybe the possibility of hope. Maybe that was enough. Far away in the cold depths of space, Hive Queen Zarketh felt the disturbance. Her consciousness stretched across the entire Calreth swarm. touching millions of her children. She felt their hunger, their endless need to consume and grow. For 300 years, nothing had truly challenged them. Species fought and died. Worlds burned and were consumed. It was the natural order. But now something new approached. Something her swarm mind did not recognize. The bioships in the Nexus system felt it too. A massive energy signature moving impossibly fast, heading directly toward them. Zarketh examined the data through the eyes of her children. A ship large, but ships could be overwhelmed. The Calreth had destroyed thousands of large vessels. They would destroy one more. She sent the command through the hive mind. Prepare for battle, destroy the intruder, consume everything. It was what they always did. It was what they were created to do. Zarketh did not yet understand that everything was about to change. That humanity had spent 150 years preparing for this moment. That they had sacrificed everything, transformed themselves completely, all for one purpose. The Calreth were about to learn what happens when you threaten a species that refuses to die. The message traveled through space at the speed of light, passing through the invisible boundary of the quarantine barrier. Inside human space, automated defense systems registered the incoming transmission. They had been waiting for 150 years. Within milliseconds, the message was decoded, analyzed, and forwarded to the appropriate authorities. Deep within the Sol system, in a massive orbital station that ringed Earth like a mechanical moon, Fleet Admiral Chen received the distress call. She was old now, over 90. But genetic modifications kept her sharp. She had been a young officer when humanity made the decision to isolate itself. She had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. She read the message 3 times. The galaxy was dying. The Calreth swarm was consuming everything. Billions were dead. The Galactic Council was down to their last defenses. They were begging for help from anyone who might listen. Send word to the High Command, Chen said to her aide. Tell them the Calreth have advanced beyond our projections. We need to deploy immediately. How many ships, Admiral? Chen looked out the viewport at the fleet that filled the space around Earth. Thousands of vessels, from massive titans that dwarfed planets to small attack craft. Every single one built for war. 150 years of construction. 400 billion humans all working toward one goal. Send the first wave, she said. 48 vessels. That should be enough to make our point. On the council station, Vexithar tried to focus on the evacuation plans, but his mind kept returning to that impossible ship. The sensors tracked it as it crossed the gulf of space toward the Calreth lines. 3 days had passed since it emerged. 3 days of watching something that should not exist. Any response from the ship? He asked for the 100th time. No, sir. It's maintaining communication silence. But Admiral, you need to see this. The tactical display updated. A small Calreth splinter fleet, maybe 300 bioships, had changed course. They were heading toward human space. They're going to breach the quarantine barrier, the officer said. They must have detected the energy signature when the main ship came through. Vexthar cursed. Can we warn them? We've been trying, sir. No response from human space. 300 Calreth bioships was not a massive force, but it was enough to devastate an unprepared system. If the humans really were as peaceful as they had been 150 years ago, they would be slaughtered. Keep trying to make contact, Vexthar ordered, and track that splinter fleet. I want to know the moment they reach human space. The Calreth ships moved with terrible purpose. They were organic vessels, grown rather than built, covered in chitinous armor and armed with acid projectors and biological missiles. Inside each ship, thousands of Calreth warriors waited in hibernation, ready to swarm and consume any world they found. The splinter fleet reached the edge of human space 2 days later. They passed through the gap in the quarantine barrier where the massive ship had emerged. Sensors showed them entering the first human system, a minor colony world according to records from 150 years ago. Vexthar watched the sensor feeds with growing dread. This was how it always started. The Calreth would consume the outer colonies, then push deeper. If humans really had survived behind their barrier, they were about to learn what the rest of the galaxy already knew. The Calreth were unstoppable. But then something strange happened. The Calreth fleet stopped broadcasting. Their signals simply cut off all at once. It was as if they had been switched off like a light. What happened? Vexthar demanded. Unknown, sir. We've lost all contact with the Calreth ships. They just disappeared. Ships don't just disappear. Send a probe. I want to know what's happening in that system. The probe took 6 hours to reach the edge of human space. What it found made no sense. The Calreth fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged. Simply gone. The space where 300 bioships had been was empty. Not even debris remained. But human ships were there. Dozens of them, sleek and dangerous-looking. They patrolled the border like guards, watching for more intruders. When the Council probe got too close, one of the human ships moved to intercept. A voice came through on all frequencies. It was calm, professional, terrifying in its efficiency. "This is United Earth Space Command Border Patrol. You are entering quarantined space. Turn back immediately or you will be destroyed." The probe retreated, but it had captured enough data. The human ships were advanced far beyond anything they had been 150 years ago. Their weapons were clearly visible. Their armor was thick. These were warships, pure and simple. And they had somehow eliminated 300 Calreth bioships without leaving a trace. "What kind of weapon does that?" an officer whispered as they reviewed the probe data. "I don't know," Vexthar said, "but I think we're about to find out." The massive human ship reached the Talus system on the 7th day. The Council had observation probes throughout the system, watching as the Calreth consumed 3 inhabited moons. 10,000 Calreth bioships swarmed through space like insects, stripping every scrap of organic matter, every mineral, even the atmosphere itself. The human ship decelerated as it entered the system. This close, the sensors could finally get accurate readings. 54 kilometers long, 20 kilometers wide, mass readings that suggested solid armor at least 100 meters thick, energy signatures that indicated power generation equivalent to a small star. "By the ancestors," someone whispered in the command center. "It's a mobile fortress." The ship broadcast on all frequencies. The voice was female, strong and clear. "This is Captain Elena Vostok of the United Earth Space Command vessel, Absolute Resolve Titan-class warship. We received your distress call. All sentient species are to clear the combat zone immediately. The Calreth incursion ends now." Vexthar grabbed the communication controls. "Captain Vostok, this is Admiral Vexthar of the Galactic Council. There are 10,000 Calreth bioships in that system. I strongly advise, Admiral, we are aware of the enemy numbers. Clear the zone. We will handle this. Captain, you don't understand. The Calreth will swarm you. One ship cannot, Admiral." Her voice was sharp now. "We did not travel this far to debate tactics. Clear the zone." Vexthar wanted to argue more, but something in her voice stopped him. This was not the uncertain voice of someone untested. This was a commander who knew exactly what she was doing. "All Council ships, pull back to observation range," he ordered reluctantly. The few remaining Council vessels in the system retreated. That left only the Absolute Resolve and 10,000 Calreth bioships. The Calreth had noticed the human ship by now. They reacted as they always did. They swarmed. Bioships broke off from their feeding patterns and accelerated toward the Absolute Resolve. They moved in perfect coordination, guided by the hive mind. Thousands of weapons charged. The Calreth would overwhelm this single ship, just as they had overwhelmed thousands of others. But the Absolute Resolve did not fire, not yet. Instead, panels opened along its hull. Thousands of them. And from each panel, small craft emerged. They looked like insects themselves, mechanical wasps barely 10 meters long. But there were so many of them. 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. The drones formed a cloud around the Absolute Resolve like a swarm protecting their queen. Then the human ship moved. Something that large should have been slow, unwieldy. Instead, it maneuvered like a fighter craft, rolling to present its broadside to the approaching Calreth swarm. The weapons fired. Vexthar had seen every weapon the galaxy had to offer. He had seen antimatter torpedoes, plasma cannons, graviton beams. Nothing prepared him for what the humans had built. The first weapons were kinetic, but these were not simple railguns. These were relativistic mass drivers, accelerating metal slugs to 90% of light speed. When they hit, the Calreth bioships simply ceased to exist. The impacts released energy equivalent to nuclear weapons. Each shot punched through dozens of ships before the slugs finally dispersed. The second weapons were energy-based. Coherent gamma-ray lances that burned with the intensity of stellar cores. The beams swept through the Calreth formation like a farmer's scythe through wheat. Where they touched, bioships simply vaporized. The radiation sterilized everything at the cellular level. Even Calreth acid could not survive. The third weapons were the most terrifying. Gravitational projectors that created localized gravity wells. Bioships caught in the fields crumpled like paper, crushed by forces equivalent to a planet's core. Some were pulled together and compressed into spheres of organic matter that then ignited from the pressure, burning like tiny stars. The drones were not passive either. They moved through the Calreth swarm like piranha through water. Each one carried cutting lasers and shaped charges. They targeted specific points on the bioships, weakening armor, destroying weapons, killing the organic components that kept the vessels alive. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, not a single Calreth bioship remained. The absolute resolve floated in space, surrounded by the expanding debris cloud of 10,000 destroyed vessels. The human ship had not taken a single hit. Its shields had absorbed the few Calreth weapons that got through, barely registering the impacts. The command center on the council station was silent. Everyone stared at the tactical display in shock. What they had just witnessed should not have been possible. One ship had destroyed what would have taken the entire council fleet to even slow down. Captain Vostok's voice came through again. This is absolute resolve to Galactic Council. The Talus system is clear. We will maintain position here until you can arrange recovery operations for survivors. Captain Vostok out. Then another transmission followed, this one directed specifically at the Council leadership. Admiral Vexthar, Ambassador Celine. This is Captain Elena Vostok. We need to talk. Humanity has been monitoring your war with the Calreth. We've been preparing for this. We're sorry we took so long. We're sorry for a lot of things. But we're here now. And we're going to end this. Vexthar sat down heavily in his chair. His hands were shaking. Around him, the command center erupted in chaos. Some officers cheered. Others stood in shocked silence. A few openly wept with relief. Ambassador Celine appeared on his communication screen. Tears ran down her blue face, but she was smiling. They came, she whispered. I told you they would come. One ship destroyed 10,000, Vexthar said. He could not quite believe it. Celine, what did the humans become? Far away, in the deepest regions of Calreth space, Hive Queen Zarketh processed the information from her destroyed children. In 300 years of conquest, she had never experienced this. 10,000 of her children gone in minutes. The information was incomplete. The mental connection severed so quickly that she only got fragments. But those fragments told a terrifying story. A single ship. Weapons beyond anything encountered before. Perfect efficiency, no mercy. For the first time in her long existence, Zarketh felt something she did not have a name for. It was not fear exactly. The Calreth did not truly understand fear. But it was close. It was the recognition that something existed in the galaxy that could challenge the swarm. She sent out the command to all her children across the galaxy. Find these humans. Learn about them. Prepare. The easy conquest was over. Real war had begun. The council chamber was packed to capacity when Captain Elena Vostok arrived. Every species wanted to see the human who had destroyed 10,000 Calreth bioships with a single vessel. Security had to hold back crowds outside. The mood was electric, a mixture of hope and fear that Vexthar recognized all too well. Elena Vostok walked through the main entrance with 4 guards flanking her. She was tall for a human, maybe 190 centimeters, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her uniform was black and gray, functional and unadorned except for rank insignia. Her eyes were the most striking feature, a pale gray that seemed to evaluate everything with cold calculation. She was young, maybe 40 standard years, but she carried herself like someone much older. Someone who had seen too much. Someone who had done things that left permanent marks on the soul. Ambassador Celine met her at the entrance. The empathic Valorian's smile faltered slightly when she came close to Elena. Vexthar wondered what she felt. What emotions radiated from this human? Captain Vostok, welcome to the council station. I'm Ambassador Celine. We spoke 150 years ago during first contact. Though I suppose you wouldn't remember. I have the records, Elena said. Her voice was polite but distant. You were kind to my ancestors. They spoke well of the Valorian people. They walked together toward the main chamber. Celine kept glancing at Elena, her expression troubled. Finally, she spoke quietly. Captain, may I ask a personal question? Of course, Ambassador. What happened to your people? The humans we met 150 years ago were so different. They were curious, open, passionate. You seem, I don't mean to offend, but you seem cold. Elena stopped walking. She turned to face Celine directly. We changed, Ambassador, we had to. When we saw what was coming, we made a choice. We chose survival over everything else. Over art, over philosophy, over individuality. We chose to become what we needed to be. She paused. You're an empath. What do you feel from me? Celine's face went pale. I feel nothing. It's like standing next to a machine. How is that possible? You're alive, but there's no emotional resonance. No joy, no fear, no... We were trained that way, Elena said simply. Emotions cloud judgment. They make you hesitate. We couldn't afford that. She started walking again. Come, the council is waiting. The chamber erupted in questions the moment Elena entered. Representatives from dozens of species all shouted at once. Elena simply stood at the central podium and waited. Her calm silence was somehow more commanding than any shout. Gradually, the room quieted. Vexithar spoke first. Captain Vostok, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I thank you for responding to our distress call. What we witnessed at Talos was extraordinary, but we need to understand. What happened to humanity? Where have you been? And most importantly, can you help us win this war? Elena tapped a control on her wrist. A holographic display appeared above the podium, showing star charts and tactical data. 151 years ago, a human exploration vessel encountered a damaged Calreth scout ship near our border. The Calreth were injured, dying. We tried to help them. They killed the entire crew and destroyed the ship, but not before we transmitted detailed information about them back to Earth. The display showed images of Calreth bioships, anatomy scans, behavioral analysis. We studied everything we could. We accessed Galactic Council databases, reviewed every encounter, every battle. We ran simulations. The results were clear. The Calreth would eventually reach human space, and when they did, we would not survive. So you hid, someone said from the audience. Elena's gray eyes found the speaker. No, we prepared. There's a difference. We knew we couldn't fight the Calreth as we were. We were too soft, too divided, too focused on the wrong things. So we changed everything. The display shifted to show Earth and its colonies. First, we united completely. Every human nation, every colony, every political faction. We dissolved all governments and created a single unified command structure, the United Earth Space Command. There were no more countries, no more competing interests, only survival. That must have been difficult, Celine said softly. It was necessary, Elena replied without emotion. Then we boosted our population. Genetic engineering, cloning, artificial wombs. We grew our numbers from 15 billion to 400 billion in 100 years. Every single human was assigned a role based on genetic aptitude and psychological profile. If you were suited for engineering, you became an engineer. If you were suited for combat, you became a soldier. The display showed massive industrial complexes, shipyards that stretched for thousands of kilometers, factories that covered entire planets. We converted 70% of our industrial capacity to war production. We strip-mined 3 planets to bare rock. We harvested asteroids, deconstructed moons, built orbital foundries around every star in our territory. We had one goal: build a fleet capable of defeating the Calreth. Vexthar leaned forward. How many ships? 50 Titan-class warships like the Absolute Resolve, 500 Dreadnought-class vessels, 2,000 cruisers, 10,000 support ships, 400,000 smaller combat craft, and 20 million autonomous combat drones. Elena paused. We also built medical ships, colony vessels, and construction platforms. We knew we'd need to rebuild after the war. The chamber was silent. Those numbers were impossible. The entire Galactic Council at its height had never fielded a fleet that large. That's just your first fleet? Vexthar asked. That's the only fleet we need, Elena said. We didn't just build ships, Admiral. We advanced our technology by what we estimate to be 200 years beyond where we were. We solved problems that Council scientists said were impossible. Faster-than-light travel without hyperspace gates, gravitational manipulation, antimatter containment at room temperature, relativistic kinetics with controlled decay. We had to. The Calreth gave us no choice. She tapped another control. The display showed human soldiers training, endless rows of them. Every human is a soldier or supports soldiers. We begin training at age 5. By age 15, every human can field strip any weapon we possess, can perform emergency medical procedures, can operate any vehicle or vessel. By age 20, they're assigned to their permanent roles. I've commanded the Absolute Resolve since I was 28. I've trained for it my entire life. Ambassador Celine spoke, her voice sad. What about your culture? Your art, your music, your literature. The humans we met loved those things. We archived it, Elena said. Every book, every painting, every song. All saved in deep storage. Someday, if we survive, maybe we can access it again. Learn to appreciate it again. But we're not sure we can. We've changed too much. She looked at Celine. You asked what happened to us, Ambassador. We weaponized ourselves. We took everything that made us human and put it away. We became tools, weapons, whatever the galaxy needed us to be. That's horrifying, someone said. Elena nodded. Yes, it is. But we're alive. And now we're here to make sure you stay alive too. Vexthar stood. Captain, we appreciate your offer of help. But even with your fleet, the Calreth outnumber us. They have millions of bioships spread across hundreds of systems. This war has dragged on for 3 centuries. What makes you think we can win? Elena's expression didn't change. Because you've been fighting defensively. You've been trying to hold territory, protect worlds, minimize casualties. Those are good goals for a peacetime military. But this isn't peacetime. This is an extinction war. She tapped her controls again. The display showed a map of Calreth space. Red markers indicated their major concentrations. We've been observing this war for 150 years. We've mapped every Calreth position, analyzed every battle, studied their tactics. We know where their breeding worlds are. We know their supply lines. We know their weaknesses. The Calreth don't have weaknesses, a Chromath representative said. We've been trying to find them for 300 years. Everyone has weaknesses, Elena said. The Calreth's weakness is that they're a biological species. They need to eat. They need to breed. They need specific environmental conditions for their young. Cut off their breeding worlds and the swarm stops growing. Destroy their supply chains and they starve. They're not unstoppable. They're just a species that adapted well for conquest. But adaptation works both ways. She highlighted 5 systems deep in Calreth space. These are their primary breeding worlds. They produce 90% of all new Calreth warriors. The Hive Queen herself is based in one of these systems. We attack here, cut off their reproduction, and the war ends. The chamber erupted in argument. That's suicide. Those systems are defended by millions of bioships. We'd never get close. Even if we could, how would we destroy entire planets? Elena waited for the noise to die down. We have the weapons. We have the ships. We have the training. What we need is for you to decide if you're willing to take the offensive. If you're willing to do what's necessary to win. Vexthar felt a chill run down his spine. Captain, what exactly are you proposing? Total war, Elena said simply. We stop defending, we attack. We push into Calreth space and we don't stop until we reach their breeding worlds. Then we destroy those worlds completely. We eliminate the Calreth's ability to reproduce. Without new warriors, the existing swarm will eventually die out. The war will be over. You're talking about genocide, Celine whispered. I'm talking about survival, Elena corrected. The Calreth will never stop. Never surrender. Never coexist. You know this. You've tried negotiation. You've tried containment. Nothing works. So we remove them as a threat permanently. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. I know what I'm proposing is terrible. I know it crosses lines that civilized species don't cross. But you're not civilized anymore. You're dying. You can keep dying slowly while trying to maintain your moral high ground. Or you can get your hands dirty and survive. The choice is yours. And if we refuse, someone asked. Elena's expression didn't change. Then we'll do it ourselves. The Calreth killed our scout ship 150 years ago. They made themselves humanity's enemy. We don't forgive that. We don't forget it. With or without the Council, we're going to end the Calreth threat. She deactivated the holographic display. You have 48 hours to decide. Either join us or stay behind. But understand this, the galaxy is going to change. The age of the Calreth is ending. What comes after depends on what you choose today. Elena turned and walked out of the chamber, her guards following. She left behind a chamber full of species representatives staring at each other in shocked silence. Vexthar looked at Ambassador Silene. She was crying silently. They saved us, she whispered. But they destroyed themselves to do it. Those aren't the same humans we met. Those humans are gone. Maybe, Vexthar said. But these humans can win. That's what matters now. He stood and addressed the chamber. We have 48 hours to vote. I suggest we use that time wisely. Personally, I'm tired of losing. I'm tired of watching worlds die. If these humans can end this war, I'll follow them into the abyss if necessary. The vote took 46 hours. It was not unanimous. Some species refused to participate in what they saw as genocide, but enough voted yes. The combined fleet would form. The offensive would begin. Humanity had returned to the galaxy, and they had brought war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The fleet assembled at Nexus Station, the last major council stronghold before Calreth space. It was the largest armada ever gathered in galactic history. 48 human Titan-class warships formed the core, each one a mobile fortress bristling with weapons. Around them, the 500 human dreadnoughts arranged themselves in perfect formation. The Council had contributed their remaining forces, 800 warships from dozens of species. All told, nearly 1,500 major capital ships waited to push into enemy territory. But it was not just the capital ships that made this fleet terrifying. Surrounding them were thousands of smaller vessels, millions of combat drones and supply ships carrying enough ammunition to glass 100 worlds. The humans had even brought mobile shipyards, massive stations that could repair damaged vessels in the field. They had planned for everything. Admiral Vexthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dravine battleship Eternal Vigil. It was old now, scarred by decades of combat. Next to the human vessels, it looked like a toy, but it was his command and he would not abandon it. Captain Elena Vostok's face appeared on his communication screen. She was on the bridge of the Absolute Resolve, surrounded by human officers who moved with mechanical efficiency. Admiral, all fleets report ready. We can begin the offensive on your order. My order? Vexthar was surprised. Captain, this is your operation. Your fleet is 10 times more powerful than ours. You should lead. This is your galaxy, Admiral. Your people have been fighting this war for 3 centuries. The Council forces deserve to have one of their own in command. I'm here to support you, not replace you. Vexthar felt a surge of respect. Despite all their power, the humans were willing to follow. That took a kind of strength that had nothing to do with weapons. Very well, Captain. All ships, this is Admiral Vexthar. Today we stop retreating. Today we attack. For every world we've lost, for every life taken, we will make the Calreth pay. All ships, advance! The fleet moved as one. Hundreds of vessels pushed forward into Calreth territory. The human ships led the way, their advanced sensors detecting threats long before Council ships could. The first Calreth resistance came within 3 hours. A patrol fleet of 200 bioships moved to intercept. They outnumbered the point guard significantly. Under normal circumstances, this would have been a major battle. Instead, it was a massacre. 3 human dreadnoughts broke formation and accelerated toward the Calreth. Their weapons fired at extreme range, relativistic slugs crossing the distance in seconds. The bioships tried to evade, but they were too slow. 50 Calreth vessels exploded in the first salvo. The survivors scattered, trying to escape back to their main forces. The human drones caught them. Thousands of small automated craft swarmed the fleeing bioships like piranha. Within minutes, not a single Calreth vessel remained. The 3 human dreadnoughts returned to formation. They had not taken a single hit. By the ancestors, Vexthar whispered. Is this how all the battles will go? The small ones, yes, Elena said on his screen. But the Calreth are adapting already. Watch. The fleet pushed deeper. Over the next week, they liberated 6 occupied systems. Worlds that had been consumed only months ago were reclaimed. The Calreth fought harder each time, learning from previous encounters. They began using kamikaze tactics, ramming human ships with suicide vessels. They deployed biological weapons, clouds of acid and toxins. They tried overwhelming numbers, throwing thousands of bioships at single targets. Nothing worked. The human ships were too well armored, too fast, too coordinated. Their point defense systems destroyed suicide ships before they could impact. Their shields neutralized biological weapons. When overwhelmed by numbers, they simply called for support. Another human vessel would arrive, clear the area, and move on. But the Council ships were not as fortunate. They lacked the humans' advanced technology. When Calreth bioships got close, Council vessels took damage. Ships were lost. Crews died. It was a stark reminder that while the humans had advanced beyond recognition, the rest of the galaxy was still vulnerable. Elena noticed the losses. She reorganized the fleet, placing Council ships in the rear where they could provide support fire but remain safer. Some Council captains objected, saying it was cowardly to hide behind the humans. Vexthar overruled them. "Swallow your pride," he told them. "We're here to win, not prove ourselves. Let the humans take the vanguard. Our time will come." The fleet reached the first major Calreth stronghold after 2 weeks of fighting. The Corvin system contained a former Council colony world that had been transformed into a Calreth fortress. 5,000 bioships guarded the system. Millions of Calreth warriors waited on the surface to repel any invasion. "This will be our first real test," Elena said during the command briefing. Her holographic image stood in Vexthar's war room alongside other fleet commanders. "The Calreth will defend this system with everything they have. We need to break them here, show them that nowhere is safe." "How do we approach it?" asked Commander Thelron, a Chromath who led the Council Heavy Assault Division. Elena highlighted the tactical display. "The Calreth expect us to hammer away at their defenses with frontal assault. That's how the Council has always fought, so we do something different. We split the fleet. 40% of our forces will engage the main Calreth concentration here. Draw their attention. The remaining 60% will micro-jump around the system perimeter and hit them from behind. Simultaneous assault from multiple vectors. They can't defend everywhere at once." "Micro-jumps are dangerous so close to a gravity well," someone objected. "For your ships, yes," Elena said without judgment. "Our navigation systems can handle it, trust me. This will work." The battle for Corvin system began the next day. The main fleet, led by 20 human titans and all the Council forces, pushed toward the Calreth lines. The bioships swarmed to meet them, confident in their numbers. For an hour, it seemed like a traditional engagement. Weapons fire lit up space. Ships on both sides took damage. Then the second wave arrived. 28 human titans micro-jumped into position all around the system simultaneously. They appeared within weapons range of the Calreth rear formations. Before the bioships could react, the humans opened fire with everything they had. The Calreth fleet was caught between two forces. Their coordination broke down. Ships collided with each other, trying to reorient. The hive mind link that usually made them so effective became a weakness as panic spread through the network. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 4,800 Calreth bioships were destroyed. The remaining 200 fled deeper into Calreth space. The combined fleet had lost 15 ships, all of them Council vessels. On the planet below, the Calreth warriors prepared to defend against invasion. They never got the chance. The humans deployed a new weapon. From orbit, they fired penetrator rounds deep into the planet's crust. The rounds didn't explode immediately. They burrowed down to the mantle, beneath the Calreth installations, beneath their breeding chambers, down to where the rock was molten. When they detonated, the results were catastrophic. Massive volcanic eruptions ripped across the surface. Earthquakes shattered the Calreth fortress structures. Within hours, the entire planet was uninhabitable, not by destruction, but by making the environment hostile to Calreth biology. The temperature soared. The atmosphere filled with ash and toxins. The Calreth could not survive there. "You terraform the planet against them," Vexthar said quietly. "Geoengineering weapons," Elena confirmed. "It's more efficient than invasion. Why risk soldiers when you can make the environment itself hostile? Is that what you plan to do to all Calreth-occupied worlds?" "No, most worlds will just liberate. But strategic strongholds like this one, we make sure the Calreth can't use them again." The fleet pressed onward. World after world fell to the combined offensive. The Calreth tried to mount counterattacks, launching massive raids against Council territory. But human ships were always there to intercept. It was as if the humans could predict where the Calreth would strike. They probably could. 150 years of observation had taught them the patterns of Calreth strategy. 2 months into the offensive, they had reclaimed 40 systems. Territory the Council had thought lost forever was back under their control. Refugee ships began returning to their homeworlds. Reconstruction started even as the war continued, but the deeper they pushed, the fiercer the resistance became. The Calreth were pulling back their forces, consolidating around their core breeding systems. They were preparing for a final defense. Elena called a fleet meeting. All major commanders gathered, either in person or via hologram. She looked tired, Vexthar noticed. For the first time since he met her, Elena Vostok looked like she felt something. Strain, perhaps, or worry. "We're approaching the Calreth core systems," she said. "Intelligence suggests they've pulled back over 1 million bioships to defend their breeding worlds. That's 10 times what we've faced so far. The Hive Queen herself is there. This will be the decisive battle of the war. Can we win? Theleron asked bluntly. Yes, Elena said. But it will cost us. We'll lose ships. A lot of ships. Both human and council vessels. The Calreth won't have anything to lose at this point. They'll fight with absolute desperation. Ambassador Silene was present via hologram. She had been following the fleet, documenting everything for the council archives. Captain Vostok, there's something I need to ask. Something that's been troubling me. Go ahead, Ambassador. You've been very efficient in this campaign. Minimal losses, maximum effect. But I've noticed your tactics are becoming more brutal. The geoengineering weapons. The complete destruction of Calreth infrastructure. You're not just defeating them. You're eliminating them. That's the goal, Elena said simply. But is it necessary? We're winning. The Calreth are retreating. Couldn't we negotiate some kind of truce? Force them into a contained region of space? Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. Ambassador, I'm going to tell you something that Command authorized me to share. The Titans like the Absolute Resolve, they're not just warships. They carry planet-killer weapons. Stellar cascade bombs that can ignite a world's core and destroy it completely. Not just make it uninhabitable. Actually destroy the planet. Turn it into an asteroid field. The room went silent. Vexthar felt cold. We built them for the Calreth breeding worlds, Elena continued. 5 worlds, 5 weapons. We end their ability to reproduce and the swarm dies out over the next century. No negotiation. No containment. Just extinction. That's genocide, Silene whispered. Yes, Elena agreed, it is. And I'm asking the Council to authorize it. Absolutely not, several commanders shouted at once. This is too far! We're not mass murderers. Elena waited for the shouting to die down. Then what's your alternative? We've proven we can beat the Calreth in battle, but they still outnumber us. They can still rebuild. As long as their breeding worlds exist, they'll keep coming. Maybe not today, maybe not in 10 years. But eventually they'll recover. And this war starts all over again. Is that what you want? To pass this problem to the next generation? There has to be another way, Silene said. If there is, tell me, Elena said. I genuinely want to know. We didn't build these weapons because we wanted to. We built them because we couldn't find any other solution. The Calreth don't negotiate. They don't stop. They don't change. They exist to consume. The only way to stop them permanently is to remove their ability to create more Calreth. Vexthar stood slowly. Everyone turned to look at him. I need to ask you something, Captain. If we refuse to authorize these weapons, what will humanity do? Elena met his eyes. We'll use them anyway. We came here to end the Calreth threat. Not delay it, not contain it, end it. We'll do that with or without Council approval, but we'd prefer to do it together. So we can share in the moral guilt, Vexthar said. So you can share in the peace that follows, Elena corrected. When this is over, when the Calreth are gone, your people will rebuild. Your children will grow up without fear of being consumed. Isn't that worth the cost? Vexthar looked around the room at the other commanders. He saw uncertainty, horror, but also something else. Relief. The secret hope that someone else would make this terrible choice for them. I need to think about this, he said finally. We all do. We'll vote before we reach the Calreth core systems. But Captain Vostok, I want you to know something. You humans sacrificed everything to save us. You became monsters so we didn't have to. I just hope you can forgive yourselves when this is over. Elena's expression didn't change. Forgiveness isn't something we think about anymore, Admiral. We think about survival. That's all we have left. The combined fleet gathered at the edge of Calreth core space. Before them lay 5 systems, each containing a breeding world. Long-range sensors showed the defenses. Over 1 million Calreth bioships spread across the systems in perfect defensive formations. It was every Calreth warrior that could be spared from across the galaxy. The Hive Queen had called them all home. Admiral Vexthar stood in his ready room staring at the tactical display. In a few hours, the Council would vote on whether to authorize the use of humanity's planet-killer weapons. He had spent 3 days thinking about it. 3 days of wrestling with his conscience. Ambassador Silene sat across from him. She looked older now, worn down by everything she had witnessed. Being an empath in the middle of a war was its own kind of torture. Have you decided how you'll vote? She asked. I don't know, Vexthar admitted. As a soldier, the choice is clear. We use every weapon we have to win. As a person with a conscience, it horrifies me. destroying 5 entire planets. Billions of Calreth, even if they're monsters, it's still genocide. The humans will do it regardless, Celine said softly. Captain Vostok made that clear. Yes. So maybe the question is whether we want to be part of it or stand aside and pretend we're innocent. Celine smiled sadly. There's no innocence left in this war. We lost that the moment we asked the humans for help. We knew what they were. We knew what they'd become. We just didn't want to admit we were asking them to be monsters on our behalf. The vote came 2 hours later. Every species on the council had to decide. The debate was fierce. Some argued that genocide was never justified, that they would be no better than the Calreth. Others said survival demanded harsh choices. A few abstained, unable to choose either way. In the end, the vote passed. 28 species voted yes, 15 voted no, 6 abstained. The planet killer weapons were authorized. Elena received the news on the bridge of the Absolute Resolve. She showed no reaction. She simply nodded and began issuing orders. Signal all Titan-class vessels. Arm the stellar cascade bombs. Prepare for final offensive. The fleet moved forward into the first system. The Calreth were waiting. 200,000 bioships filled the space between the fleet and the breeding world. They did not attack immediately. For the first time in recorded history, the Calreth tried to communicate. A signal came through on all frequencies. It was the Hive Queen. Her voice was like grinding stone, inhuman and terrifying. But the words were clear. Humans, we see what you have become. We understand your purpose. We offer a proposal. The Calreth will withdraw from all occupied territory. We will retreat to these core systems. We will not expand further. There can be peace between us, Elena responded personally. Hive Queen Zarketh, we received your proposal. It is rejected. The Calreth will be eliminated. There is no negotiation. We can coexist, the Hive Queen said. There was something in her voice. Not quite desperation, but close. We do not wish to die. You should have thought of that before you spent 300 years consuming the galaxy, Elena said coldly. You gave the Council no mercy. You destroyed species that begged for peace. You consumed children, innocents, everyone. You made yourself into a threat that had to be eliminated. This is the consequence of your choices. If you attack, we will fight. Many of your ships will die. Many of your warriors will perish. Is it worth the cost? Yes, Elena said simply. All ships advance. Weapons free, the battle began. It was like nothing the galaxy had ever witnessed. 1 million Calreth bioships against 1,500 Council and human capital ships. The numbers favored the Calreth overwhelmingly. But numbers were not everything. The human Titans moved into a spherical formation, their weapons creating overlapping fields of fire. The Council ships took position behind them, adding their firepower to the human vessels. The combat drones deployed in clouds so thick they looked like metal fog. The Calreth attacked in waves, trying to overwhelm the fleet through sheer numbers. Bioships crashed against the human shields like waves against a cliff. The relativistic weapons fired constantly, each shot destroying dozens of targets. The gamma-ray lances swept through space, carving burning paths through the Calreth formations. But there were too many. For every Calreth bioship destroyed, 3 more took its place. They adapted their tactics continuously, learning from each failed attack. They began targeting specific ships, focusing their fire to overwhelm individual shields. They used their bodies as shields, sacrificing thousands to get a few ships, close enough to deal damage. The first human ship to fall was the Dreadnought Vengeful Dawn. It was swarmed by 500 bioships that crashed through its shields through sheer weight of numbers. They tore it apart with acid and claws. 2,000 human crew died in seconds. More ships fell. Human vessels, Council vessels, it didn't matter. The Calreth were fighting for their survival now. And they fought with absolute desperation. They had nothing left to lose. Vexthar's flagship took a direct hit. A Calreth suicide vessel made it through the defensive fire and rammed the hull. The explosion killed 30 of his crew and crippled his engines. Eternal Vigil is dead in space. His tactical officer shouted. We're sitting targets. Elena's voice came through immediately. Eternal Vigil, this is Absolute Resolve. We're moving to cover you. Hold position! The massive Titan shifted, placing itself between Vexthar's ship and the Calreth swarm. Its weapons fired in every direction, creating a protective wall of destruction. But even the Absolute Resolve was taking damage now. Its shields were holding, but they flared constantly under the endless barrage. Captain, we're at 40% shield strength, one of Elena's officers reported. If they concentrate fire, they could break through. Maintain position, Elena ordered. We don't leave anyone behind. The battle raged for 18 hours. Ships died on both sides. The space around the breeding world became a graveyard of twisted metal and organic matter. The casualty count climbed into the hundreds of thousands. But slowly, inevitably, the human weapons began to tell. The Calreth numbers decreased. Their formations grew more disorganized. The hive mind was struggling to coordinate so many individuals under such stress. Finally, a gap opened in the Calreth lines. The Absolute Resolve and 4 other Titans pushed through, heading directly for the breeding world below. The Calreth tried to stop them, throwing everything they had at the 5 ships. It wasn't enough. The Titans entered orbit. They positioned themselves at precise points around the planet. Each one launched a single weapon toward the surface. The stellar cascade bombs pierced the atmosphere and burrowed deep into the crust, deeper than any bunker, deeper than any Calreth tunnel system. Down to where the mantle met the core, the bombs activated simultaneously. They didn't explode in a traditional sense. Instead, they triggered a chain reaction in the planet's core, forcing it to collapse inward and then rebound with catastrophic force. The planet convulsed. The crust split open. Magma erupted in jets that reached into space. The atmosphere ignited. In orbit, the Calreth bioship simply stopped. Their connection to the breeding world below, to the billions of Calreth eggs and larvae that were being consumed in the planet's death, it overwhelmed the hive mind. They drifted, paralyzed by shared agony. The human and council ships destroyed them methodically. It was not a battle anymore. It was an execution. The planet died over the course of 6 hours. By the end, nothing remained but a glowing sphere of molten rock that would take centuries to cool. Every Calreth on the surface was dead. Every egg, every larvae, every breeding chamber. Gone. 1 down, Elena said quietly. 4 to go. The fleet moved to the next system. The pattern repeated. Massive battle, devastating casualties, breakthrough, deployment of planet killers. The second breeding world died. Then the third. By the 4th system, the Calreth resistance was noticeably weaker. They had lost too many ships. The hive mind was fragmenting. The 5th and final system was where Hive Queen Zarketh made her personal stand. She commanded the last major concentration of Calreth forces personally, her bioship larger and more powerful than any other. She fought with the fury of a species facing extinction. "You are making a mistake," she broadcast as the battle raged. "The Calreth may be gone, but what comes after? You humans have proven yourselves to be effective killers. The galaxy will fear you now. They will wonder if they are next. You have become the very thing you fought against." Elena didn't respond. She focused on the battle, on keeping her crew alive, on achieving the mission. But Vexthar, watching from his repaired flagship, wondered if the Hive Queen had a point. The final planet killer launched. The 5th and last breeding world began to die. Hive Queen Zarketh's final words echoed across all frequencies. "We are not the last threat you will face. Others will come. And when they do, will you destroy them too? Where does it end, humans? Where does it end?" Then her signal cut off as her bioship was destroyed by a gamma-ray lance. The Hive Queen was dead. The breeding worlds were gone. The war was over. The remaining Calreth bioships across the galaxy went dormant. Without the hive mind's guidance, without new warriors being born, they were just organic vessels drifting in space. The Council sent teams to destroy them systematically. It would take months, but it was simple cleanup now. The threat was ended. The combined fleet gathered in orbit around the last destroyed breeding world. They had won. The cost had been high. 300 ships lost. Over 2 million dead human and council species alike. But they had won. Admiral Vexthar stood on his bridge and looked at the glowing remnants of the planet below. 5 worlds destroyed. Billions of Calreth dead. Genocide on a scale the galaxy had never seen. And he had voted for it. Was it worth it? He asked Ambassador Celine, who stood beside him. "We survived," she said quietly. "Our children will grow up without fear of being consumed. Isn't that worth any price? I don't know anymore." 1 year later, the galaxy was rebuilding. Worlds that had been consumed were being terraformed and recolonized. Refugees returned to their homes. The Council began restructuring, planning for a peaceful future. The war was truly over. The human fleet began to dismantle. The weapons were decommissioned. The soldiers started transitioning to civilian life. But it was not easy. 150 years of single-minded purpose of being trained only for war could not be undone overnight. Captain Elena Vostok retired from the UESC. She returned to Earth for the first time in 20 years. The planet was different from what she remembered. Construction was everywhere as humanity tried to rebuild the culture they had set aside. Museums were reopening, art schools were being established. People were learning to create again instead of just destroy, but Elena found she could not connect to any of it. She walked through an art gallery and felt nothing. She listened to music and heard only noise. The part of her that could appreciate beauty had been cut away so long ago, she didn't know if it could ever grow back. She lived in a small apartment near the ocean. She spent her days walking on the beach, trying to remember what it felt like to be human instead of a weapon. Most days she failed. Ambassador Celine came to visit her 6 months after the war ended. She found Elena sitting on the beach staring at the sunset. "How are you adjusting?" Celine asked, sitting beside her. "I'm not," Elena said simply. "I can't. We changed too much. Gave up too much. I don't know how to be a person anymore. I only know how to be a soldier." "You saved the galaxy," Celine said softly. "I know. And I destroyed 5 worlds doing it. I killed billions. I turned myself into a monster. Was it worth it? I don't know. I can't feel enough to know." Celine was quiet for a moment. Then she took Elena's hand. "Let me help you. Let us help all of you. The Council owes humanity everything. We have empaths, therapists, teachers, people who can help you remember what you gave up. It won't be easy. It might take generations. But you don't have to stay as weapons forever." Elena looked at their joined hands. She felt the warmth of Celine's touch, the first real physical contact she'd had in months. Something stirred in her chest. Not quite emotion, not yet, but maybe the possibility of emotion. "You really think we can come back from this?" she asked. "I think you have to try," Celine said. "You became monsters to save us. The least we can do is help you become human again." They sat together and watched the sun set over the ocean. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, other humans were having similar conversations, learning to paint again, learning to write poetry, learning to feel. It would take time. Decades, maybe centuries. The scars ran deep, but humanity had proven they could change themselves completely once before. Maybe they could do it again. Maybe they could learn to be both strong enough to protect themselves and human enough to enjoy what they protected. The age of the Calreth was over. The age of rebuilding had begun. And in the quiet moments between reconstruction efforts, people whispered stories about the humans who had saved them, the species that had sacrificed everything, become weapons incarnate, and then tried to find their way back to being people. Some species feared them. Others respected them. All remembered them. And humanity? They tried their best to remember who they used to be before the war. Before the quarantine. Before they made the choice to survive at any cost. It was the hardest battle they had ever fought. But for the first time in 150 years, they were fighting to build instead of destroy. And maybe, just maybe, that made all the difference.